Okay, well, obviously the panel's called Make VC Great Again, so I thought I'd bring a red hat, but obviously we don't need this because I hate that guy, so that's yours. Right. I'm delighted to introduce my panel. We're going to be talking about, well, you're so far away. Look at you. Goodness me. How are we going to do this? Right. Can we see everybody? Well, let's hear from our panelists first, and let's hear what they're doing, and then we'll get into the subject. You're all sitting next to me first, Dimple. Dimple's from an impact fund, Anthos Fund, and it's a family office. And just give us a little sort of 30-second intro about yourself and what you're doing.
Hi, everyone. Is the mic on?
Have a little test.
Hello? Test?
Keep testing.
Testing.
No, we don't. We have a microphone problem. Let's get another microphone and check, because I think we need to. Dimple's microphone needs to be checked. Hopefully that'll be working by the time we come to you. We'll start right at the end. Julio Benetti, General Partners, Mandy Ventures. What's Mandy Ventures?
So, can you hear me? Yes.
Nope. Yes.
Mandy Ventures is a venture capital fund focused on food, agriculture, and new materials. So we look into interesting companies with interesting technologies, trying to revolutionize the space. The fund has two main offices, so in Europe, based in Brussels and Belgium, and in São Paulo as well in Brazil. We cover a few different geographies: Brazil, Latin America, Europe. That's basically what we do.
Let's just check it. Okay, I'm trying to be a sound man at the same time. No, that is definitely wrong. Okay, we'll see if that goes.
Okay.
I think, yes. Okay, good.
We're back.
Magic, I did that. Great.
TechCrunch, everybody. TechCrunch.
TechCrunch, all those years playing drums. Next up, Eve, chairman at Hearst Lab. What is Hearst Lab?
So Hearst Lab is an incubator that is global now, but based in New York, and we find definitively, unapologetively, only female founders, and we have 60 companies and about $2.3 billion of value that's been created with about $50 million investment. So we're pretty new. We're just entering the world stage, and we are now in Amsterdam, New York, Madrid. We're on our way to Japan and Saudi Arabia. It's the time of women in those two countries.
Amazing. And Pablo, Q Impact.
So Q Impact is one of the first impact investment asset managers in the Iberian Peninsula. We invest in small and medium companies that are providing solutions to the main social and environmental challenges. We invest with a broad mandate from education to rural development to energy transition, helping companies scale and make sure that the value proposition aligns both impact and value for our investors.
Amazing. Finally, Dimple.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dimple Sani. I work at Anthos. It's a family office and an asset management firm owned by the Brenninkmeijer family. They started a company 200 years ago called CNA, or CNA, as we say in Europe. I lead their impact investing efforts. So we are an LP, which means I invest in impact funds. We have a global mandate, but all of our private venture funds, both debt and equity, are really in emerging markets. So I'm really excited to hear about those entrepreneurs and funds that have ambitions of going from Southern Europe all the way to Latin America and really going much more international, because we want to do scale. We invest across every sector and every geography in emerging markets.
Brilliant. Well, let's get into some of the subjects then. Now, so it's 2023, we've just had a 15-year bull run market, we're now in a bear market. If impact investing was going to take off, it would have taken off let's go for 2019 or 2020. So where are we now? Why are we having a panel about impact? Surely all funds should have been impact oriented by now, no? Eve, what do you think?
So I take a little bit of issue with the idea of impact. I mean, we are 50% of the population is female. So I would argue that we've done supremely well supporting women there. They make great products, they run great businesses. Is that impact? I just think that's successful business. But we're incredibly intentional about that. And I think it's time for the world to acknowledge that only 2% of the venture money goes to women. less than 2% here in this country, to be totally honest, and it's kind of time for everyone to understand that if you want to have impact in the world, you've got to take on the other 50% of the population. So from our point of view, we do not see a bear market. We are incredibly bullish. Our companies have done better than traditional venture across the globe, and we continue to use the same formula. And I guess that's impact investing, but to me it's setting the world in a better place.
Well, fair enough. Yes, absolutely. But Dimple, what do you think though that it's been the whole impact thing has been too channeled into a sort of more of a smaller and smaller niche in some ways?
Actually, I think it's proliferating. So we invest in impact across all asset classes. We do public equities, public fixed income, real estate, private debt, and private equity. At the family office, my portfolio has tripled in size, and I have outperformed many of my male peers in the family office because the impact portfolio has been very resilient, actually, in these last 3 years for pandemic, climate change, and geopolitical risk. So you don't need to be a contrarian, but if you have a long-term view, this is exactly the right time you should be doubling down on impact.
So so actually what you're saying is that impact is going to be more of a contrarian, counter-cyclical market.
Well, it's generally uncorrelated to what's happening in the market.
Right.
So because of my impact positions, they've been very resilient. So it hasn't experienced the highs and lows of the rest of the market.
Oh, I see. Julio, you're doing a lot of, your fund is very interested in food tech and ag tech. I mean, we're always going to need food for obvious reasons. So would you say that gives you a resilience compared to other funds?
I think so. As a fund like investing in food and agriculture, as you mentioned, I mean, we have challenges, right? Population is growing. With the development in the economy, especially in the emerging markets, you see that people are eating more diversified, and also things which are more intense in terms of resources, right? So there are quite a big challenges that need to be solved in this space. They will not go away. The market might go to one side to the other. People still need to eat. They need nutritious food. We need to find ways to produce food in a way that we have the quantities we need, but also like in a way that we can limit the impact that we have in the environment. We are passing through this climate crisis or climate transition, and that puts pressure in a sector which today's it's already suffering, right? So we need to bring resilience to the food and agriculture. We need to bring the nutritious need for the population. So if the market go up and down, we still need to eat. The problems will be there, and I think the way we see the problem as Mundi Venture is we want to solve big problems, right? We want to solve problems that matter for everybody in the world, and food and agriculture is there. Again, markets might favor or not favor certain investment theses, but overall the trend is there. We need to make investments. We need to bring more resilience to the food chain. And we need to find ways to produce food in a more scalable way, but also a way which is sustainable.
Well, I know that Pablo is speaking of the fact that you've got to talk about scale. Pablo, your fund Q Impact, you're investing in any kind of business that has an impact. Do you think that the returns will be more outsized as a result of things like what Julia mentioned, like the climate crisis? Mm-hmm. The concentration on those subjects will give you more of an advantage than, say, traditional investors.
So we like to talk about an impact lens more than an impact asset class or a strategy. But everything that we do, we ask ourselves if we are being part of the solution or being part of the problem. So the first is to originate our opportunities. We ask ourselves, what is the problem? And then we try to find profitable solutions. So that's what, as Dimple was saying, when there is a problem, there's a scarcity, and that's a business opportunity for us. So we focus on those unattended market and help those potential champions to thrive and scale their solution. So with the growth of the company, we also provide a mass scale solution, and that's the way we align both impact and value creation. So it's more the way we approach business all along the investment value chain is taking into account not only the what, trying to find solutions, but also the how.
What's to stop any investor having an impact lens?
more and more investors are having that impact lens, but also trying to answer the name of the panel, no? Make VC great again. We've also done some things just for the money without looking at the consequences. We've invested too much in social networks or media trying to provide a solution, and it's created a big problem of isolation, anxiety, depression across the board, because we didn't think about what the long-term impact of those investments were. So it's about that, about thinking with the long lenses and trying to see what is the end or the effect of our investment decisions that we'll have in the people or on the planet, and trying to be part of the solution.
I think it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably 20 years ago, a lot of people thought that the internet itself would have a positive impact on the world. And in fact, you know, when social networks turned up, we thought that would be a good thing because it would, you know, make people come together and, you know, start to understand each other. But of course, the business model of things like Facebook and Instagram is really about gaslighting us into engagement. And of course, the news story today is that Instagram has been hosting an enormous network for pedophiles, for child abusers. And so I think we can pretty much park social networks outside the impact lens at this point. But let me say to you, Dimple, from a family office perspective, over the last 10 years or so, a lot of family offices, especially as a new generation has come along, especially say the millennial generation has you know, taken on mum and dad's mantle of like, you know, let's not invest in property anymore and let's invest in something that's more scalable and has kind of a more interesting effect. I mean, what's the sort of culture around that, and has that, you know, have you noticed many more family offices operating in this way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a rise of the family office model. So for those of you who don't know, family offices are really wealthy families that are so wealthy they don't have to bank with everyone else. They just create their own investment firm and invest their own money and then hire an investment team to do it. But for these multi-generational families, as the next generation are taking control of operating roles, governance roles, and the purse strings, they absolutely want to do a lot more in impact and do it in a much bolder way that's much more relevant. So for example, the family that I work with, they're in the apparel industry, right, which is one of the worst actors in general in the climate space.
Because clothes create a lot of carbon
water, the dyes, the supply chain, right? You have to be really careful about workers' rights, fair trades, working conditions. They created a new institute called Fashion for Good, which is upending their own industry. In that Fashion for Good, they have a plug-and-play incubator that's incubating indigenous entrepreneurs from emerging markets who are trying to, through input, output, supply chain, create new textile businesses using upcycling, recycling businesses. But more importantly, my portfolio for now is still the smallest one in the family office, and if the next gen had their way, it would be inverted. My portfolio would be the biggest one, and they want us to start using things like AI, deep tech, the language that they speak, which is always through tech. They want to invest in much bolder tech, not low tech, but high tech solutions. And the way we reach the next gen family members is we've gamified what impact investing is. We give them simulation games and we do polls and quizzes so that they're getting much more educated about what it means to be sustainable, what it means to measure the impact of what you do. So I think how you educate the next gen about it is also really different. But yeah, that rise and conversion of capital is coming when they get into the control.
It's very interesting, isn't it? And I think it's been actually rather nice that that's happened over the last few years. Eve, would you say that the kinds of problems that the women entrepreneurs that you fund, that the problems that they attack with their companies and their ideas are the kinds of ideas and problems that are kind of invisible to a lot of, say, mainstream, or shall we, you know, for want of a better phrase, male entrepreneurs look at?
It's a really great question, and I think it's unconscious in that bias to not look at it, so I don't, you know, put hostility to that at all, but I think what you do find is the products that have been successful are very different than what a man would ever make. For example, we have a company called Bodily, which gives you an indication of where I'm going. And Bodily is a company that provides, over a 3-week period, things that women need right before they give birth, during birth, and right after birth. So, for those of you who've ever given birth, you have cracked nipples. For those of you who've ever given birth, you get very sore underneath, and so there are certain kinds of things you need. They're not pretty, they're not nice, but they're very, very helpful. And before you go, there's certain information you want to know. You only want to know it then, and you don't care after you've given birth. That very narrow set of products and information has created a company that's on target now to make $25 million a year. So it's a good example of where if you bring in the other 50% of the population on very normal bodily things or very normal products that women use every day, you get an awful lot of impact to the company, country, world, to financial investors, and to women themselves. So they all kind of go nicely together. But I really appreciate that question, because I think that kind of is missed in the impact discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the VCs I know, not necessarily impact VCs, but certainly early stage VCs, they started to notice a few years ago that if they invested in women entrepreneurs, they were solving problems that were just, really kind of invisible to lots of
And the returns are better.
People. Sorry?
The returns are better.
Yes, and this is the thing, is that, the returns were so
Making
much
more
more
money off us.
outsized.
That's great.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the whole ESG thing. So, environmental sustainable governance. Over the last few years, ESG, environment, sustainability, governance, have been, baked into certain kinds of funds. There was famously the BlackRock statement about they were going to invest invest very much more in ESG funds, and it took off, and that was kind of just before the pandemic, and then all hell broke loose, and probably a lot of people sort of kind of parked a lot of their ideas. What do you think, Julio, about that ESG, that whole ESG thing? Financial Times wrote a few weeks ago that, in a way, we shouldn't really. The environment is such a big issue now. Climate crisis is going to be so enormous that really the environment aspect of ESG is the kind of the only thing that matters now at this point. And if you get the environment aspect right, you solve the sustainability and the governance side of things. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think there are different problems, right? Being Brazilian, being born in Brazil, and seeing, the structure of, society and economy, you see that obviously there are environmental problems, but the problems that they have like a social nature, right? When you think in terms, like, let's think myopic of food and agriculture. You go to the supermarket, you buy, a product, a fruit, a banana. You might not know how that was produced, but in the end, it was a farmer doing that, and normally, like, small farmers, right? And those small farmers, they have challenges, right? They are operating their business. Farming is a business, very low margin business with a lot of pressures outside, right? They are big buyers, so they're pressured for prices. All the inputs they buy from big players as well, so they're kind of like stuck in between. They have the climate, right? And one year you might have like good rain, the other year you might not have good rain. And the nature of the operation makes it challenging to keep over. And you might not know, but this farmer might be struggling to get access to financing, right? They need to buy an equipment which would enable them to produce more, to be more resilient, to finance the crop in a certain year. That's not all environment, right? There's a social aspect as well, offering a product which might be, let's say microcredit for this farmer, which is easy to get, which has like interesting interest rate for them. I think has a tremendous impact, right, in the resilience of the system, because we know that the farmer will not get out of the business. You can improve their lives, and they can invest in things that eventually will be better for the environment as well. So I think the environment's super important, but there are other optics that we should look when we look into solving those problems and other business opportunities. I mean, that microcredit might become a good business, right? And it might be able to scale, go to different places, and impact those communities, those farmers in different ways.
So would you agree, Pablo? Would you agree that you have to look you're still looking at sustainability and governance as well as environment, or what's your view?
So I think we are all involved in a broader movement. No? We're trying to change the framework in which we use to make decisions. Like in the last 200 years, we've been involved in this model where growth and profits meant everything, and that's taken the planet beyond the point of no return, and that's also leaving a significant part of the population behind. So it's about time that we not only think about profit or risk, but also we include what is the effect that our decisions are having in our future, in the future of the planet. And we are kind of the vanguard in trying to do so and involve more people into doing so. Regulation is looking in the same direction, but sometimes bring health is helpful, sometimes bring confusion. But I think it's important that we all, as consumers, as investors, as managers, as everyone, we try to look beyond and try to what is the long-term effect of our decisions and incorporate those into what we do and how we do that.
To what extent does everybody look at diversity of teams? Obviously, Hearst Labs, you're 100% after women founders, and that's stated goal. But does it matter, for instance, that you're investing in an impact-oriented startup? Does it matter that it's an all-male founder team, or do you care about those kinds of things? What do you think?
Well, you're asking a woman of color who's on stage, so yeah, I ask it. I ask the GPs about their
what's
own
the
teams.
answer?
I think it's very important, but I think, look, I mean, I think the argument that there isn't enough good women in the pipeline for entrepreneurs or investors is false. It's a false narrative. I think it's just the power structure.
Is it because people are just not looking, in a way?
Yeah, or they're not contacting people like myself or Eve who have connections to other amazing women all along the value chain of investments, from entrepreneurship to limited partners. Diverse teams do perform better. I certainly ask it unabashedly now. More importantly, there are a lot more female...
So it's not just for optics, you're talking actually about for the fact that actually they're going to perform better as well.
Oh, 100%. But remember, there's also a lot of female billionaires out there now. McKinsey Scott, Melinda Gates, female athletes, Serena Williams. They're all investing in...
Serena Williams is famously investing in a lot of tech now.
100%.
Yeah.
A lot of athletes are, but I mean, they're all looking for diverse teams. But it's not because they want to feel good about it. It's because they understand their own journey, but they also have read the data, which says that diverse teams outperform.
Eve. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say one last thing about ESG.
Okay. Sorry.
I think they're all inextricably linked, and I think this is what Pablo was saying.
Yeah.
I think Europe is further ahead on the E, and the U.S. is further ahead on the S, because in the U.S. we talk about race, everything that's uncomfortable, it sits right at the surface. So we've had the movements like hashtag Time's Up, Me Too, Black Lives Matter. In Europe, I think the S is a little bit more subversive, but everyone here is all about climate, at least in the Nordics and the Netherlands where I live.
Certainly.
So.
Quick
Yeah, I would say that the data certainly supports when you have a diversity of perspective, let's call, whether it's female, people of color, and also, trans, LGBT, just diversity of perspective brings you better results, and it brings you a more diverse workforce, which brings you those results. For example, at the lab, 68% of the people who are in the teams in the lab are women or people of color. So that's what female CEOs have just brought you in 60 companies. That's just, an ecosystem that didn't set out, to your point, to hire anyone particular other than who would do the job and do it particularly well, with a very broad lens for meeting the criteria, the best person you get for the job, and that's what you get. And then you get returns that are oversized, and you get products that the world hasn't had. So I think, the data would certainly support it. I think it's less political, it's more commercial, and it's then, of course, just the right thing to do for companies. And there's a ripple effect, right? Whether it's climate, whether it's governance, whether it's social, they all, I agree with very much with Dimple, they come together through that process when you have a level playing field.
Right. Well, we've got about, poor old Spain, because we've only got about 2 minutes left to talk about Spain and Europe and whether or not we're getting it right on impact. Dimple, you just had a little, you mentioned something just now. Let's start with you, Julio. Do you think Spain's getting it right on impact and on Europe generally?
I think for the thesis we're looking for, like food and agriculture, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of things going on across Europe, Spain particularly. I mean, Spain is one of the major agricultural countries in Europe. If you take certain, verticals such as, fruits, vegetables, Spain extremely relevant. So we are seeing, interesting technologies coming. We are seeing investors actually willing to invest in those companies and willing to back these different, technologies and investment thesis. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
you're
And
optimistic?
I think in a
Optimistic?
I'm optimistic. I mean, there are big tailwinds.
Eve, what about your perspective?
Absolutely. I think Spain is at the beginning of a really important time. The High Commissioner of Innovation has just passed laws through the Parliament, and there's a lot of money in this country now to support all the things that we're talking about. So I'm
here we are
very
doing-
optimistic.
Doing an impact panel at South Summit. Bye-bye.
So the term was coined in 2007, so the industry is about 15 years old. In Spain, we launched the first funds in 2019, 2020. So we're overcoming the infantile diseases.
You're getting
But
there.
We're getting a lot of
And
traction.
there's appetite at governmental level for this as
Yes,
well?
yes.
Every day more is becoming more across the board. Everybody is agreeing that we need to do something else.
And Dimple, you mentioned that Europe was stronger in some things than others compared to the US. What do you see the future holding?
Well, I don't think we'll have panels like this, per your earlier prediction. I hope that impact will be subsumed in literally everything that we do. And every entrepreneur, whether you're ed tech, health tech, fintech, you're going to be focusing on underserved markets, and you're going to be doing it with, an ESG or impact lens.
What a lovely bookend to bring the panel to a close. We started off saying we shouldn't really have an impact panel anymore, and probably in years to come, there won't be any more impact panels. All of the panels will have an element of impact in them, I dare say. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, from Mike Butcher from TechCrunch, thank you so much for joining us. Please, round of applause for our panel. Thank you very much.